Greetings YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about an old school role-playing game. One that I bought when it came out originally in 1988. And it is known as the Justifiers role-playing game. One of the few role-playing games I've ever encountered that actually had the acronym RPG in its title. Now, the Justifiers role-playing game was interesting to me because it dealt with what the game referred to as beta humanoids. And a beta humanoid was a genetic fusion of human genes and animal genes. So essentially you had humanoid animals as your player characters. Yes, it's a game that's furry. But in 1988, it was probably the first game to really broach this concept. And it was really before the furry community came into being on a large scale. I actually don't know the history of the furry community, so anybody who sees this and is a furry, I apologize if I'm stepping on your history. Now, I have a love of anthropomorphic characters. I think they're cool. I collect images I find online. I enjoy role-playing games that have anthropomorphic characters. The animal slash type races in like Dungeons & Dragons are some of my favorites, whether it's mammals or lizards or insects, doesn't matter. I think they're cool. I've always enjoyed that. I like werewolves, things like that. I think they're interesting ideas in role-playing games. And this is a unusual in that as a digest-sized game, and this is a model that you saw in the early era of role-playing games, like Traveller. The original Dungeons & Dragons books were small like this, and the games moved out of that over time. They went into a box set style of role-playing game, and eventually people started putting out thicker perfect bounds and hardcovers. I know when hardcover books came out, it was a big deal for role-playing games. But the characters in this, the beta humanoids, are essentially second-class citizens, one step above slaves. They've been genetically engineered to be members of what's called survey teams. Survey teams go out and they find new planets, they explore the new planets, decide if they're worthy of colonization or exploitation, and then they move on. So, and they're out there on the sharp end of things because, frankly, if they die, no one cares. But if they earn enough money, they can use that money to buy their freedom. They can become full-blown citizens. Of course, socially, they would still be second class. Now, I wrote a timeline for this game because I love the idea. And I wrote this really long timeline, and it was very elaborate, and it started in 2005, which is completely and utterly out of date now, because in 2005 we were not creating genetically engineered creatures. But when I wrote this, it was back in the early 90s. So with the idea of 2005 being a point where we could start fusing human and chimpanzee DNA, it didn't seem that far-fetched to me. Of course it does now. And the bad guys in my timeline, at least the initial bad guys, were I think Iraq or Iran, and they were supposed to have done some horrible terrorist attacks and wipe out millions of people with a biogenetically engineered disease. And that doesn't seem likely to ever happen, thankfully, either. I actually also own some of the supplements for this game. Cold as Ice, which is a campaign set on one of the worlds they discover. Poseidon, an ocean world setting. The Corporate Sourcebook, which deals with the corporations that are essentially in control of the world that this game is set in. The Tower, another adventure about a planet that they explore, and Out of the Mists, again another planet they explore. And just today I've discovered that there are 5 supplements for this game that I don't own, which depresses me to no end because they're not part of my collection. So I'm going to have to do what I see what I can do about getting those games to add to my collection because I want the complete Justifiers game. Now, at one point they were supposed to do a Justifiers Omega, which would have been an updated version of this game and brought it into the 21st century. But I haven't heard anything about that in years, and I think this is the last time I heard anything about that at all was 2004. So it seems to be in limbo. It's become vaporware. In fact, I contacted the original writer and asked if he had any information about how I could get the rest of the supplements, and he didn't have copies that were for sale any longer. So it was kind of sad. I have found that a couple of them are available on Amazon, so I may be purchasing them in the near future, one at a time or so I don't break my budget. This is a great game if you enjoy the anthropomorphic setting. I also recommend the game Albedo, which is a world full of anthropomorphic animals. And of course, there is the After the Bomb game from Palladium, which has the best rules for creating anthropomorphic animals I've ever read. And my favorite version of the Gamma World game, which is the 4th edition, has some pretty decent rules as well. And these are all good rule games if you want to play a humanoid, or at least a partially humanoid, animal in a science fiction setting. The rules for this were a little clunky. I did a lot of house ruling to the system, and I kind of rewrote the rules the way I thought they should have been. And unfortunately, the campaign I wrote them for, and it took me weeks to do this, never got off the ground. Just what happens sometimes. But if you're looking for an old school game that is interesting and the art is not too bad, take a chance and pick up a copy of Justifiers. I think it's a pretty cool setting.